If it's Monday, extremism in America. Has the fever broken or is it getting worse? New questions about the rise in hate crimes and political violence in the wake of a new report from the FBI. Plus, the U.S. is set to announce a scientific breakthrough on fusion energy. Could it be a potential game changer in the hunt for carbon-free power and the fight against climate change? And strengthening ties. President Biden prepares to back the African Union's entry into the G20 alliance as a high-stakes summit with dozens of world leaders kicks off in Washington this week. Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Kristen Welker. We begin with a question that has loomed over our politics for years now and taken on new importance in the wake of the midterms. What is the state of extremism in this country? It's a question that isn't easy to answer, and one widely followed report that is supposed to give us some clues into a key component of extremism in America has itself only raised more questions. Every year, the FBI releases its annual report on hate crimes, and this year, experts were expecting it to show a significant rise in incidents across the country, but the report out this morning is, in a phrase, woefully incomplete. According to the Bureau, more than 7,200 hate crimes were reported to the FBI last year, but experts say that represents just a fraction of the actual number. Because the statistics are from just 65% of police agencies who reported their data to the FBI, down from 93% the previous year. And some of the largest police jurisdictions, including New York and Los Angeles, are among those departments that did not report their numbers. But for a more complete picture, a study by the Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism at Cal State San Bernardino found a 20% increase in hate crimes last year compared to 2020. That study also reports a 4.7% increase in hate crimes for the first half of this year. Meanwhile, the second half of 2022 has been marked by a series of high-profile attacks suspected to be hate crimes, including last month's mass shooting at an LGBTQ club in Colorado. Combating violent ideologies is an issue that the Biden administration says is high on its priority list. DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas spoke at an event on combating anti-Semitism in New York just this morning.
Our work continues. We hope to one day, of course, eradicate hate. To this end, each of us can reach out, use our convening power, and bring people together. As we do so, we will continue to dedicate ourselves to keeping our community safe and secure.
Joining me now is NBC News correspondent Jacob Soboroff. He sat down with the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas as part of a News Now special on anti-Semitism in America. NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delanian. And in a moment, I'll be joined by Cynthia Miller-Idris, the founding director of American University's Polarization and Extremism Research Lab. Ken, let me start with you. Break down what we have learned from this report and where it falls short. There are still a lot of questions, right?
That's right, Kristen. I wouldn't say we've learned very much, because with only 65% of police departments reporting, you really can't draw many conclusions from the numbers that the FBI provided today, except that they counted an aggregate number of 7,200 hate crimes, which, even though that's incomplete, would be the third highest in a decade. But most private experts who've studied this say that they believe that 2021 was a record year for hate crimes and that 2022 may break that record. But we just don't know that from the data, because the FBI changed its reporting requirements to a more complicated methodology that they say ultimately will tell us more about crime, but it's more difficult for local police departments to comply with. And although they've had years to figure out how to do this, many have not done it yet. And so not only local cities like New York and L.A. did not report anything, major parts of big states like Florida and California didn't report. And so we just have an incomplete picture of the situation with hate crimes. By the way, this reporting problem also surfaced when the FBI put out its aggregate level of crimes a few months ago, but they used estimates to fill the gaps. They're not able to do that with hate crimes because there aren't enough hate crimes. So we really have an incomplete picture.
Well, Ken, let me follow up with you, because when you're talking about major cities like New York and L.A., the expectation is they would be able to report out these statistics. So why is their data missing?
Well, for one thing, experts say they are not required to do this. And so if they decided that this was too technically complicated and they didn't have the staff to report it exactly the way the FBI wanted it, they weren't able to do it. Now, the FBI promised that things will improve next year. It's a gradual process. The Justice Department has awarded grants to various jurisdictions to help them comply because it's more labor-intensive, apparently. Look, New York knows how many hate crimes there were, but they haven't reported them to the FBI in the way that the FBI wanted them.
Well, and DOJ did put out a press release pegged to the crime numbers, basically listing various initiatives to quell hate crimes and extremism. So is the implication and the message that they are taking serious action despite the fact that they have this incomplete data?
That was certainly what I got from that news release, which came out hours after this FBI release. It was almost the Justice Department saying, look, we know this isn't great, but here's everything we're doing on hate crimes. And the Biden administration has really made a point, and the FBI under Christopher Wray, of going after these crimes, and they're horrific crimes. I mean, just a few weeks ago, a man pleaded guilty to burning a cross in Mississippi in his yard to intimidate a black family. And back in August, a Texas man was sentenced to 45 years in prison, Kristen, for slashing an Asian family, including a 6-year-old child, in a Sam's Club in Midland, Texas. So really horrific crimes, and the DOJ is taking them on.
Such incredibly disturbing details that you lay out there, Ken. Jacob, let me turn to you. Congratulations on this exclusive with the DHS secretary. What was his big message to you? You obviously were focusing on the issue of anti-Semitism. What did he say?
That data or not, Kristen, that there is an epidemic of hate in the United States of America. Those are the words of the second gentleman. But Secretary Mayorkas himself has been out front and outspoken about the issue of potential domestic terrorism targeting not just Jewish Americans, but religious minorities, ethnic minorities, LGBTQ plus individuals. He issued a national terrorism advisory bulletin just last month saying that all of these groups could be subject to violent attack here in the homeland, in the United States of America. But in particular, anti-Semitism is important to Secretary Mayorkas. He's Cuban-American, but he's also Jewish-American. His mother fled the Holocaust. He lost 9 family members in the Holocaust himself. And when he sat down for his confirmation hearing, he had said anti-Semitism and combating it is one of the top issues for him. He wanted to eradicate hate. I asked him about that. Here's what he had to say. Nearly 2 years ago at your confirmation hearing, you said that you had wanted to tackle the issue of anti-Semitism once and for all. But what I hear you saying today is it's only gotten worse.
I think that's absolutely right. But our fight has only become more fervent. The resources we have invested in it have become greater. Our dedication to addressing targeted violence against any group has become more and more intense. Unfortunately, Jacob, as you correctly note, the need for it has increased as well.
You know, we didn't just talk about that need, Kristen. We talked about the causes, and one of the causes that we spoke about was words and how anti-Semitism and those words matter so much. They turn into more than words. We talked about former President Trump's dinner with Nick Fuentes, the words of Kanye West, who was also at that dinner with them at Mar-a-Lago. And Secretary Mayorkas very pointedly called that type of language that we heard from Kanye West horrific.
Jacob, you talk about some of the actions that DHS is planning to take and has already taken. But what kind of resources does DHS have? Do they have enough, or are they going to need to ask for more funding from Congress? What's the outlook there?
I think his perspective is it's both. They have given grants to state, local, non-governmental organizations to help harden targets against potential attacks, anti-Semitism or hate or otherwise. But he is also well aware that there is a lot of work yet to do, and especially in the area of speech. And what a fine line that is. Ken knows this well. There was a Senate Homeland Security Committee report that called out the Department of Homeland Security for not being tough enough on rooting out domestic terrorism on the internet. And Secretary Mayorkas and I talked about the challenges associated with that. He said, look, speech is protected. Free speech is enshrined in the United States Constitution. But it is when that speech veers into hate speech that turns into violence. That's when there is a real challenge. And that's where the Department of Homeland Security is trying to step in and put their resources towards combating.
Ken, let me get your take on what Jacob is saying, because it's such an important point, right? That what is happening online it can be very dangerous in and of itself. So talk a little bit about what the FBI, other law enforcement agencies are trying to do. And as Jacob rightfully notes, it's really a fine line. To some extent, hate is protected under free speech.
Yeah, it's an excruciating dilemma, and I'm so glad that Jacob was able to ask the secretary about it, because DHS has actually taken some steps this year to more heavily scrutinize public social media. Again, we're talking about things that people put in public, not private communications, which would require a warrant. But what we learned from January 6th is that there was a lot of signals from public social media, people saying they wanted to do violence and wanted to come to the Capitol, that the FBI and that other agencies, including DHS, did not feel they could act on because they didn't think it was specific enough, and they were worried that they were crossing into First Amendment considerations. And they may have learned a lesson from that, because certainly that Senate report that Jacob referenced was urging DHS and FBI to do more within the law, within the First Amendment, to look at things that people are posting publicly to the extent that they're calling for violence, that they're espousing hate. Because at the end of the day, this is what we call open source intelligence. It can predict bad things happening, and it can mobilize the government to take steps to stop those things.
You know, it's so interesting, Ken. I was talking to someone over the weekend, a top U.S. official, who said in the wake of January 6th, the message was not only that there are real vulnerabilities, but that we can never let that happen again on U.S. soil. What are your conversations bearing out about that in the wake of January 6th?
Well, it's so interesting that you asked me that, Kristen, because right now we're in the middle of a debate over what exactly is going to be in the January 6th committee's final report, because Ryan Riley, my colleague, and I have written stories about a particular team of investigators whose whole job was to look at law enforcement failings and why January 6th was able to happen, leaving aside what Donald Trump and the people around him did. Where was the FBI? Why didn't they stop it? Where was the National Guard? Why didn't they get there quickly enough? There are some findings on that. It's just, it seems to be up in the air right now whether those are going to see the light of day and be in that final report. But I have to believe that eventually they will find their way to the public in some manner, because they're very, very important, Kristen.
Certainly, indeed, they are. Jacob, final to you. Based on your conversation with the DHS secretary, where do you think this issue goes from here?
Well, he says it's extremely important, Kristen, to create a larger national conversation around hate in America. The second gentleman used the words an epidemic of hate. Clearly, Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas sees this as a central part and a growing part of his job. And it's one that he, quite frankly, has not been able to tackle in the way that he wanted to tackle when he came into this office almost 2 years ago. So now faced with potential impeachment, threats to resign or be impeached over his handling of the border, with Kevin McCarthy going down to the border and saying that to him directly, and it's something that he and I talked about today. He's doubling down on focusing on not just the border, but this issue in particular as a signature hallmark of his tenure as the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security.
Well, Jacob, we look forward to seeing your entire interview a little bit later. Jacob, Ken, thank you both so much for your incredible reporting. We did have some technical difficulties with Cynthia Miller-Idris, and we will have her on to speak about this critical topic very soon. And you can catch more of Jacob's interview, as I just said, with DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas tonight on Nightly News and on the NBC News Now special titled Epidemic of Hate, Anti-Semitism in America. That is streaming this Wednesday at 10:30 p.m. Eastern. You do not want to miss that entire conversation. Coming up, we are live on Capitol Hill, where lawmakers are struggling to reach an agreement on a government funding deal, and the clock is ticking. We'll have the very latest next. Plus, President Biden prepares to host the biggest international gathering in Washington since the pandemic began on the future of U.S. Africa relations. That's ahead. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. Lawmakers on the Hill have until midnight on Friday to pass legislation that will keep the government funded through the next fiscal year. Now, negotiations have been at a standstill for weeks now, but in a hopeful sign, Democrats scrapped their plans to introduce their own partisan proposal, citing sufficient progress in negotiations over the weekend. Lawmakers have until the Friday deadline to pass either an omnibus deal that would basically include a number of other priorities or a short-term spending agreement in order to avert a partial partial government shutdown. Joining me now to discuss all of this is NBC News senior congressional correspondent Garrett Haake. Garrett, it is great to see you. So you and I do a lot of tea leaf reading whenever one of these deadlines comes up. And we got a big one over the weekend, which is the Democrats scrapped this partisan proposal they were planning to put on the table. What do you make of it? Where do things stand?
Well, by scrapping their partisan proposal, you're basically saying we think there are still good faith negotiations going on here. Kristen, look, this appears like it's going to go right down to the wire. And in fact, the wire may yet move. We've got a situation right now where kind of 3 out of the 4 entities, if you will, parties per chamber, have the same goals in mind here. And that's to pass something before the end of this year. If you're a Democrat in either the House or the Senate, whatever you can get this year before Republicans take control of the House is the best deal you're going to get. And among Senate Republicans, there's a little bit of a division on this point. But if you're Richard Shelby, who's the outgoing chair or ranking member on the Appropriations Committee, who's got his own earmarks on this bill, he's got his fingerprints all over it. If you're Mitch McConnell, who's has a sort of his own background in appropriations, you kind of like what you're seeing in this bill. You want to pass this omnibus. What you don't want to have happen, if you're in any of those groups, is to get this kicked into next year, where House Republicans, who are going to be a fractious, difficult to lead majority in the House, whoever ends up getting the gavel, get a seat at the table. And so I think what we're going to see over the next couple days at least, and possibly well into next week, is a lot of posturing here, a lot of back and forth about the deadline, and sort of everybody staring each other down to get this done this year. So there's a conversation right now. The tea leaf reading that I'm doing is the possibility of a very short continuing resolution, moving the deadline from this Friday to next Friday, and then a combination of all that brinksmanship and a little Christmas magic, getting a deal done before the end of next week. That's the most likely outcome, Kristen, but anytime, the Senate in particular starts flirting with a deadline, all it takes is 1 or 2 people who don't like that plan to slow things down and potentially stumble into a shutdown.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Garrett, can you break down, I guess, first of all, big question, are folks in Washington going to get a Christmas? Are they going to be here still working through the holiday? And what are the biggest sticking points that remain?
I think they'll get a Christmas regardless, but it will be right up until the end of next week, potentially. I mean, the best way to think about this is this. In a traditional omnibus package, Republicans say we want defense spending here. Democrats say we want parity. We want the same level. If not the exact same dollar amount, we want it to be really close. Republicans are arguing this year that defense spending should be here, but because Democrats have passed now 2 reconciliation bills, a bunch of domestic spending that isn't included in this package, that maybe domestic spending should be down here. It doesn't need to be equal. Democrats don't want that. They want that. It's about a $26 billion gap. They want to see it closed. But the point I was making earlier is if you're a Democrat, whatever you can get this year is going to be much better than what you get next year when House Republicans have a seat at the table. And then I think the other little piece of this is because this is going right down to the end of the year, this omnibus is going to be the last train leaving the station. If you have a bill, an earmark, a policy, something you're passionate about, and you don't get it passed on this piece of legislation, you're not getting it passed this year, or maybe at all. And so everybody's pet project is elbowing for room on this last piece of legislation this year.
That is for sure, Garrett. And speaking of the new Congress, I have to ask you before I go, you and I have spent a lot of time talking about this already. Leader McCarthy obviously wants the Speaker's gavel in the new year, but you have a lot of knives out right now. Yeah. What is your take? What's happening behind the scenes? Is he making deals to try to make sure he gets the 218 votes he needs?
Well, look, this is part of that same discussion, Kristen, because he's getting, a lot of pressure from the right flank to do everything he can to drag this fight over a spending bill out into next year so that his fellow House Republicans get a say on what's going to be in it. So it's an opportunity for him potentially to appease those conservatives by fighting at least as hard as he can here, even if he can't win it. I think the thing that went McCarthy's way last week is the Freedom Caucus, the folks who were opposed to him, kind of showed their hand. They at least laid out, many of them did, what they want to see from him, the rules changes they would want, the agreements they would want from him to, do things like stay out of wading into primaries in future elections. Now McCarthy knows the cost of the Speaker's gavel. He's got a couple weeks now to decide whether he's willing to pay it, and if so, how. It might be much, much harder for him to keep it, given some of these changes that conservatives want, but he knows what the cost is going to be. It's up to him to decide if he can pay it.
All right. Well, high drama coming up in the new year. Garrett Hake with your fantastic reporting and tea leaf reading. Thank you, my friend. Good to see you. Coming up next, will Democrats find a challenger to run against Kyrsten Sinema? The Arizona senator faces new criticism as her party faces an uncertain political future. My panel's next. You're watching Meet the Press now.
Many say you're considering a run for that seat in 2024. What are your thoughts?
Well, look, I've been very clear about me interested in this race. Kyrsten has decided to move to an independent. I think, that's not the end of the world. What really is in the world is that she really doesn't match Arizona values anymore. We'll be making a decision, and we'll be making a decision based on what's best for Arizona and based on what I hear from the actual constituents of Arizona.
Welcome back. That was Arizona Democratic Congressman Ruben Gallego expressing his interest in a potential 2024 Senate run now that incumbent Senator Kyrsten Sinema has switched her party affiliation to independent. Another Arizona Democratic Congressman, Greg Stanton, is also expressing interest in a potential run, as Sinema's party switch has turned a key battleground on its head nearly 2 years before Election Day. Joining me now on set is Reid Wilson, founder and editor of Pluribus News, Eugene Robinson, columnist for The Washington Post and an NBC News political analyst, and Sarah Chamberlain, president and CEO of the Republican Main Street Partnership. Thanks to all of you for being here. Happy Monday. No shortage of things to discuss with this bombshell last week. Reid, let me start with you. What do you make of what we just heard from Congressman Gallego, and how much is Senator Sinema essentially daring Democrats to run someone against her?
Well, I think she was going to get a primary challenge pretty much no matter what. She has never had a good relationship with the Arizona Democratic Party. I remember being out there covering her race against then Congresswoman Martha McSally, and it always struck me that the Republicans didn't like McSally very much, and the Democrats didn't like Sinema very much, which made them sort of anathema in this modern political climate. I think the real thing here is that Angus King must be terribly jealous that Kyrsten Sinema is getting all this attention for being an independent, and here he's been an independent for years and years, right?
He has not garnered the same type of backlash for being independent.
And Bernie Sanders.
And Bernie Sanders, too.
Okay, you bring up Bernie Sanders. Let me play you what he had to say about this over the weekend. Get your reaction.
I think the Democrats there are not all that enthusiastic about somebody who helps sabotage some of the most important legislation that protects the interests of working families and voting rights and so forth. So I think it really has to do with her political aspirations for the future in Arizona. She is a corporate Democrat who has, in fact, along with Senator Manchin, sabotaged enormously important legislation.
A corporate Democrat, Eugene. This is what we've heard.
Okay. So there's different flavors of Democrat, different flavors of Republican, right?
Is it a mistake, though, that Democrats have taken such aim at Senator Sinema? Is that part of what has not? I mean, obviously, a lot of it has to do with 2024, but it didn't encourage her to stay in the Democratic Party.
Well, so who knows what encourages or discourages Kyrsten Sinema? I don't know. I mean, frankly, it's because she doesn't talk, she doesn't tell people what's on her mind, so you have no idea whether, does she like it, does she not like it, what does she want? And that has been a question, throughout the last couple of years, including getting down to the wire on legislation. And there's the big question, what does Sinema want? What's she going to do? What's she going to say? So I'm not sure Democrats could have played it much differently. I'm also not sure how Republicans can lose the seat in 2024 if you have Sinema and a Democrat and a Republican.
Sarah? Exactly. Are Republicans licking their chops and any names being floated yet?
Absolutely. No names quite yet, but we're excited. Certainly she has helped the Republican Party in the past, as you pointed out. And absolutely, we think this is a seat we'll be able to get back in the Republican category.
And you heard Sanders kind of link her with Senator Joe Manchin. I want to play what he had to say over the weekend.
People will listen to your comments and be like, Joe Manchin is leaving the door open to potentially becoming an independent.
I don't know how you get more independent than I am.
No, I'm talking about not running as a Democrat, running as an independent, doing what Sinema is doing. People will interpret what you're saying as leaving that open.
I'll look at all of these things. I've always looked at all those things. But I have no intention of doing anything right now. Whether I do something later, I can't tell you what the future's going to bring. I can only tell you where I am and my mindset and what I want to accomplish as long as I'm here in the Senate.
Some people
I want to work with Kirsten every day the same as I have before. I respect that. And with that, all my other counterparts.
Reid, at this point, it doesn't really seem like this is going to be a trend to move into the independent column.
Well, I'll tell you, there are more independents in the United States Senate as a share of the body than there are, but not just in the U.S. House of Representatives, but in state legislatures across the country. I mean, 3% of the entire Senate is independent. For all of the angst that Sinema causes, it is remarkable, as one of your colleagues pointed out on Twitter over the weekend, just how at the center of a lot of these big deals that she's been. The American Rescue Plan, the same-sex marriage bill that just passed. She was one of the key negotiators on that. And Mr. Robinson makes a good point that she doesn't make herself known a lot, but when she speaks, she often speaks with the 50th or 51st vote.
I mean, as Eugene says, though, she is an enigma when you are negotiating with her. And I've spent a lot of time talking to White House officials who say, we just don't know if she's going to be on board at the end. And I wonder, Eugene, if you think about a re-election campaign as an independent, does that in and of itself become a liability for her, not only splitting this potentially 3 ways, but not really vocalizing where she's coming from?
It's hard. It is, Bernie Sanders did it and Angus King did it, but it's hard to get elected as an independent. It really is. And it's going to be really hard in a state where she has frankly alienated the left of the Democratic Party, certainly in Arizona and some of the rest of it. Republicans, I don't think, are going to flock to vote for her. There are a lot of independents in Arizona, but again, you are squeezed by these 2 giant parties.
Can I point out one thing, though? I'd say one thing that she did not say in her op-ed announcing that she would register as independent, she didn't say she'd run for re-election.
Right. No, exactly.
That's
exactly.
And
that is a very important point.
And I actually kind of doubt that she will, because I think she'll make the calculation that if she's number 3 in a 3-person race, she ain't going to win.
It's almost like her saying, this is, if I run, my best chance of potentially winning. Speaking of running for re-election, former President Trump we have new polling out from CNBC, which shows a strong majority of, say, both Trump and President Biden should not run for president. Again, look at these numbers. 60% say no, Trump should not run. 70% say no, President Biden should not run. Reid, what do you make of these numbers? How much of this is going to be a drag on both of them?
So I think we have disliked our politicians for a very long time. Here's a crazy stat. There have been, I think it's 216 months since George W. Bush was reelected in 2004. In 3/4 of those months, the president's disapproval rating has been higher than his approval rating. That goes across Bush, Obama, Trump, and now Biden. We are ready for a next generation. I say we, the royal we. I think Americans are ready for the next generation of political leaders, and here's further proof.
Sarah, are you surprised by those numbers, though?
No, not at all. I mean, I agree with you. The country, we're talking about 2 men who are 80 years old. I mean, it's time to switch generations and let them retire and go play golf and do what they do.
But will that happen?
and you can never count Trump out.
I'm not sure it's going to happen. And I think if Trump runs, I think Biden's going to want to run.
Yeah.
I agree with you on that. I think Biden thinks that the country needs him to defeat Trump.
Yeah, I mean, he's done it once.
Yeah.
Let me play a little bit of what John Tester told Chuck over the weekend when it comes to Democratic messaging broadly. I want to get you guys to react to that. Let's take a look.
We got to focus our message more on the things we're doing for rural America. The infrastructure package is a prime example. It's going to help rural America big time when it comes to broadband and electrical distribution and roads and bridges. We didn't talk about it. We didn't talk about it from a rural perspective. It has to be a concentrated effort, and we are very bad at message, and we need to work at that.
Eugene, does he have a point? Do you agree with him? What do you think?
Well, yeah, he's got to defend his seat in 24, and so does Sherrod Brown in Ohio. So, there are some tough seats for Democrats to keep that are up. Joe Manchin has to defend his seat. And so, I understand why he wants Democrats to focus more on a message that will connect with rural Americans. The DNC says that it has and wants to have a 50-state strategy, and that means that you need to talk to rural voters and not just talk to them, but listen to them. And I think there's something the party had better do if it wants to keep those seats.
Sarah, what are the Republicans, when you think about messaging, what do they need to do?
Well, the Republican-Main Street Partnership, we're working on that. You know, energy, talk about environment, talk about a bunch of things, inflation, that we can work on as a party. And hopefully the best thing we have going for us is the Democrats' messaging isn't that good. So we're going to continue to rely on that and hopefully get the Republican message out there. Final point to you, Reid.
Democrats are not going to win rural voters, but they can keep the margins down. Consider Terry McAuliffe when he ran for governor. He lost all of those counties in Shenandoah, but he lost them, 45-55 or 40-60. This time when he ran and lost to Governor Youngkin, he was losing those counties 25-75 or even 20-80. So it's all about cutting down those margins.
Great final point. Great panel. Thanks to all of you. Wonderful to see you, Reid, Eugene, and Sarah. Turning now to new developments in a decades-old case. A former Libyan intelligence official was taken into U.S. custody Sunday in connection with the 1988 bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland. Abu Aguila Massoud was charged 2 years ago for his alleged involvement in building the bomb. He was scheduled to make his first appearance in the U.S. District Court in Washington, D.C. this afternoon. 2 others were previously tried in Scottish courts. One was convicted on 270 counts of murder, the other acquitted of all charges. Massoud is the first to be charged in the U.S. The widow of one of the passengers, Victoria Cummock, spoke today, calling the detainment a major milestone and the first step by the U.S. to address a decades-long miscarriage of justice. All 259 passengers on the flight and 11 people in the town below died in that tragic bombing. After the break, billions of dollars and 60-plus years of research may have just paid off. I will talk to a nuclear innovation expert about a newly reported breakthrough in fusion energy and whether it could also be a breakthrough in the fight against climate change. That's next. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. All eyes will be on the Department of Energy tomorrow for a reported announcement on what could be one of the most important scientific discoveries in the last century. As first reported in the Financial Times, scientists have made a breakthrough in their pursuit of fusion energy. So why is this so significant? Well, scientists have been trying for the last 70 years to find a reliable energy system that could generate clean and carbon-free electricity that does not involve conventional nuclear energy. This discovery may do just that. I'm joined now by Alex Gilbert, a nuclear innovations expert fellow and PhD candidate at the Payne Institute of Public Policy at the Colorado School of Mines. He's also the director at a nuclear startup. Alex, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. So put this into context. How big of a breakthrough is this? What does it mean?
This is a significant breakthrough, and this really represents a number of innovations that have been happening in both the commercial and government sector for many years now. As you said, this has been the dream of fusion scientists for decades. What specifically happened here is that we were able to get more energy out of a fusion reaction than we put into it, and that is a prerequisite for any energy source. We need to be able to produce more energy from the use of it. This is a major change, and we expect to see things only accelerate in the coming years.
It's just incredible. What are the potential implications for climate change?
So if you look at our energy system right now, we have made significant progress for a number of things. We have more solar and wind online. But if you look globally, hydro, traditional nuclear fission, solar and wind are still only about 40% of power around the world. So 60% still comes from fossil fuels. And if you look beyond the electricity sector, the entire energy sector, it's over 80%. We need to decarbonize that. And even if we use all the tools that we have in our tool set right now, fusion is one more tool that can help us decarbonize more quickly. And it can also be used around the world so that we can help those emerging economies develop cleanly.
And I guess the big question on people's minds, because this is a breakthrough, but it's not yet being implemented in terms of an actual energy source, right? So how far away are we from that actually happening? Is it 10 years? Is it decades? What are you thinking?
Yep. So the specific breakthrough, we have yet to have the official announcement. If it is what we expect and what has been reported.
Important caveat there. Yes. Thank you.
It'll be net energy gain. Yeah. And that is something that has been done at a research facility, the National Ignition Facility. Now, that specific design is not meant to produce power. It's meant to show that the basic physics, the ability to do this general reaction is possible. Now, we need to use other methods that are being developed by an international project, ITER, in France, that the U.S. is partnering on, as well as commercial companies. Those are things that we will have to do demonstration projects over the next decade and a half to be able to get this to market. We need to be able to get not just energy out of the reaction, we need to get it all the way to producing electricity, which is a number of other steps we need to develop.
But you think that we could start to see this implemented practically as an energy source within a decade?
There are a number of commercial companies right now that are starting demonstration projects that will prove out their base technology. Those will be followed up by commercial projects that would break ground potentially within a decade. And the international project is set to also prove some of these principles out. It's something that if you were to ask people, say, 5 years ago, fusion was 30 years around the corner. Today, that's not the case. We could actually be relatively close to having it as a commercial source.
And help people understand exactly what fusion energy is. Is it cleaner? Is it safer? What specifically does it mean?
Yeah, so fusion energy involves the combination of atoms, lightweight atoms, to produce energy. It's the energy that we use that happens in stars. And it's really hard to combine atoms. They don't naturally want to come together. So you need conditions like a star, very high pressure, high density, high temperature, to enable it to happen. So for us to do that on Earth, we have to do a number of other innovations. We have to use specialized facilities. But if we're able to do that, it has a lot of opportunities. First, the fuel. We can actually use water that we've processed and do several things with to make that fuel. So it's not a fuel-constrained resource. It is something that the technology you can build out. It doesn't have some of the same concerns as fission. So when you're actually looking at this, there's not any concerns about, say, a runaway chain reaction, any sort of those type of safety concerns. It could just be something that you don't have the same safety cost associated with other sources of energy.
Okay, and what are the potential roadblocks? Because as you say, this is a hugely significant moment, and yet there's still a long way to go, right?
Yes. So the specific technology that is being used here at the National Ignition Facility uses laser inertial confinement fusion. What that means is that you just use very high-powered lasers to push the fuel together. Now, that technology we actually don't think will be the one that is commercialized. There's other technologies that are focused primarily on using magnets. So we actually need to develop a whole new technology path to be able to get to something that can produce energy. Then once we've done that, the ability to convert that energy into electricity is a big challenge. The energy that's produced is in the form of the kinetic energy of the charged particles. Capturing that and converting that into electricity involves multiple steps that we don't have. And even though the fuel is abundant in the long term, it is a specialized type of hydrogen. So we need to develop the fuel cycle to be able to do that. That is something that is eminently doable, but it will take time and it will take cost. And if we're talking about the urgency of climate change, we need to get started on that now to make sure that those supply chains are available.
And just very quickly, if this is the announcement we're expecting from the Department of Energy tomorrow, what do you hope people take away from this moment?
I believe that this is a potential inflection point in the future of fusion energy. This is no longer a future energy source that is conveyed to the realms of sci-fi. This is actually something that is tangible, that deserves investment. Commercial companies have raised almost $5 billion in the last several years for their different approaches. This needs more money from a public and private perspective, but this is something that the entire grid can benefit. We can see this technology come to fruition if we put the will behind it.
Okay, well, this is complicated stuff, and you helped us to understand it a whole lot better. Thank you so much, Alex Gilbert. Really appreciate the great information. Now turning to some exciting news from space to kick off this week. NASA's Orion capsule making a picture-perfect splashdown after a 25-and-a-half-day flight that took it into lunar orbit. It finally came home with a gentle landing in the Pacific Ocean yesterday. Look at that. It's right out of a movie. This uncrewed test flight wraps a successful first step for the Artemis mission. Up next, Artemis 2 plans to launch 4 astronauts for a lap around the moon in 2024. And if all goes well, NASA will be bringing humans back to the lunar surface for the first time since Apollo. Exciting stuff. And that select group of astronauts could include Jessica Watkins, who joined us right here on Meet the Press Now earlier this year from the ISS. And before we go to break, we are excited to celebrate 75 years of Meet the Press with clips and highlights from the best archive in news, given NASA's mission to return to the moon and the Orion spacecraft's safe return to Earth yesterday. Here's Colonel James McDivitt on Meet the Press, days before the historic Apollo 11 moon landing.
Colonel McDivitt, once man has landed on the moon and made a few preliminary explorations over the next few flights, what do you feel man will be doing on the moon? What will it look like up there, say, at the turn of the century, some 30 years from now?
I'm glad you asked. I think that we're going to go to different places and find out in general what the moon has. Then we're going to go back to specific places and really start concentrating on certain areas. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if we don't have a station on the moon in 30 years.
Welcome back. As Congress weighs whether or not to pass more aid to Ukraine, the White House is looking to reassure lawmakers that any money passed would not be a, quote, blank check. According to exclusive NBC News reporting, the Pentagon is working to shore up efforts to track weapons it has provided to Ukraine. Included in those efforts is discussion about sending a small number of U.S. troops into Ukraine. I'm joined now by NBC News Pentagon correspondent Courtney Kube, who has the very latest on that exclusive reporting. Court, it's great to see you. So tell us about this. What is the size and scope of any troop presence that the U.S. is considering?
Very small, Kristen. So we're talking about a very small presence that already exists there in Kyiv, and a lot of viewers may be surprised by that. There's a couple of dozen of U.S. military personnel who are attached to the embassy there with several different missions, security. There are a very small number who are already assigned to this accountability mission. But now the Pentagon is discussing shoring up that effort. Single-digit numbers of additional troops that would be sent in there, but they have a very specific expertise. They know these weapon systems, and they would have the ability, the goal would be for them to have the ability to get outside of Kyiv and to actually check some of these weapons that the Ukrainians have. This is part of the accountability mission that the Biden administration has started to make a real priority in recent weeks. There's a widespread belief that once the Republicans take over the House in January, there are going to be more and more questions about weapons and money accountability that's going to Ukraine in the coming months. And the Biden administration, including the Pentagon, are just trying to get ahead of that effort and make sure that they can say with confidence that there has not been widespread weapon diversion to date in Ukraine. That's the line we keep getting from Biden administration officials, is they don't believe many of these weapons are actually getting into the wrong hands, Kristen.
And Court, with less than a minute, what type of pushback is the administration bracing for to this plan?
So far, the officials I'm speaking to are saying this is such a small and limited presence. The scope is very narrow. It's specifically an effort that both sides of the aisle really want here. So as long as the mission remains small and specific, they're not expecting a lot of pushback. The one place where they may have to face a little resistance is the State Department's country cap. So the U.S. military can only have so many people on the ground in Ukraine right now. As long as they stay under that number, they shouldn't have a problem. And that's not just because of security reasons. It's also just basically taking care of people. Think of the situation in Kyiv. There's not always reliable electricity, water. Sometimes there's issues getting supplies. The State Department just doesn't want to take on more people than they can sustain at any given time. That's the one place we may see a little bit of resistance here, Kristen.
All right. Well, I know you will continue to track it. Courtney Kube, congratulations on a fantastic exclusive report. Appreciate it. In less than 24 hours, President Biden will host dozens of leaders from African nations in Washington for the first U.S. Africa Leaders Summit. According to the White House, the summit is an opportunity to strengthen partnerships across a range of sectors, including business, health, and peace and security. But the meeting also comes as Russia and China have both turned their attention to the African continent in hope of deepening their ties and their influence with African nations. During the three-day summit, President Biden is also expected to announce his support for the African Union to have a permanent membership at the G20. Now, that move comes after years of frustration by African nations who have felt left out of discussions on a range of global issues. Joining me now is the president of Niger, Mohamed Bazoum, who will be participating in this week's U.S. Africa Leaders Summit. He is also joined by his interpreter. Thank you both so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Katrina.
So let's just start with the big news. President Biden is going to push to get the African Union to join the G20 summit. How significant is this push by President Biden?
Je pense que c'est une chose que l'Afrique mériterait en effet. Et le président Biden a été bien avisé de suggérer ça, de le concevoir. I believe this is a very good thing that Africa deserves, and President Biden has been enlightened to organize and conceive this.
Do you believe you have the support of other G20 countries, and how significant is that going to be to a smooth transition?
Oui, je le pense en effet, parce que tous ont conscience que l'Afrique mérite de siéger là.
I believe that because all of them are very conscious that Africa deserves to have a seat in the organization.
And what will the impact be for the African Union, for your country?
Notre voix sera entendue. Il y aura des préoccupations spécifiquement africaines qui reflèteraient les desiderata de tous les pays africains qui ne sont pas à un même niveau. Voilà pourquoi il est important que nous ayons quelqu'un qui soit notre représentant.
This will allow our voice to be heard. As African countries are coming from different places, it will be good to have a unique voice to bring Africa matters to the global stage.
Former President George W. Bush announced the PEPFAR initiative to fight and combat AIDS. Former President Obama announced Power Africa. And yet, President Biden is not expected to announce a major new initiative in Africa. Are you disappointed?
I'm not disappointed because, je ne suis pas forcément déçu parce qu'en effet, les États-Unis d'Amérique vont continuer leur même engagement qui ne faiblira pas, j'en suis convaincu. C'est parce que peut-être il n'y a pas quelque chose de très précis sur la base duquel on peut organiser une mobilisation spécifique, mais le niveau d'engagement, à mon avis, va rester le même.
I am not disappointed because I believe the United States will continue their commitment to Africa, and as long as the level of commitment, and that's my belief that it will be at the same level, so it's a good thing.
China and Russia have been investing heavily in Africa and in the African Union. What more does the United States need to do? What will your message to President Biden be on that point?
Écoutez, nous avons une relation sur le plan bilatéral qui est importante, mais qui a pris de la consistance au Niger. La coopération américaine a un volume qui s'est accru considérablement et nous souhaiterions que le président Biden conforte cette dynamique-là. C'est une dynamique importante. Ne pensez pas que les États-Unis font moins que la Russie ou que la Chine. Non, je ne le pensais surtout pas.
So we have a specific cooperation agreement with the United States with very large investments in Niger. So don't believe America is doing any less than China or Russia. It's just different types of engagements.
One more very quickly. Obviously, Russia has invaded Ukraine. Given all of the investments by Russia, what is your reaction to the war in Ukraine, and do you denounce Russia's actions?
Donc, compte tenu de la guerre en Ukraine et tout ce que la Russie fait, quelle est votre position sur ça? Est-ce que vous dénoncez l'action de la Russie?
Oui, nous, au Niger, nous sommes un État de démocratie respectueux d'un certain nombre de valeurs, et notamment le principe de la souveraineté des États et la nécessité d'assurer à chaque État le respect de sa souveraineté, même quand il est faible et même quand il a un voisin qui est fort.
So in Niger, we are a young democracy with strong institutions and strong shared values. And these values include the rule of law, the rule to autodetermination, and we believe that each country, whether they are strong or a weak country, deserve to determine their own path, and to this regard, no one should be threatened.
Et donc, nous ne sommes pas d'accord avec ce que la Russie entreprend en Ukraine. Nous Nous y sommes opposés. Nous l'avons prouvé à l'occasion de tous les votes qu'il y a pu y avoir au niveau de l'Assemblée générale de l'ONU.
So we do not agree with the war in Ukraine, and we are totally against that, and we already proved that with all the votes that happened at the United Nations by condemning the war.
President Bazoum, thank you so much for being here. Thank you. We will follow this week's summit very closely.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you for watching. That does it for us this hour. Hallie Jackson picks up News Now coverage.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.